All right, well, here we are with our development team community update. We are closing in on the very end of our current sprint, where our priorities are consensus, stability, wallet and cost accounting, feature implementation, and block store refinement. So we are in pretty good shape according to our sprint plan. And making progress on all fronts. So good news there. Just as a reminder, we do intend to release our node 8.4 at the end of this current sprint. So looking at the week of March 4th for that release, and that should be a fairly significant release in terms of added feature components, as well as some, for those of you who are not working off of who are working off of the most recent release, the next release will include that updated configuration file. So if you do use a configuration file and you have not updated to the HOCON one that we are currently using in dev, do take a look at the release plan and learn more there. You can always take a look at what we're planning for Mercury in our features document. And yeah, we do have some fun things to talk about with related to testnet. So first off, we don't have a public testnet available yet. There are some known issues that we see as stability issues for the ability to run a public testnet, and they are listed in a JIRA view here. You're welcome to select that and take a look. We've made a lot of good progress on that front over the past several months and continue to make good progress as things pop up. But we do also very much want to deliver a public testnet. It's important for the community to see that, and it's also important for us to see you using it as to help us continue to refine and improve the platform. So with that, let me show you how you can get there on your own. This is the wiki. There's a link to it from RChain developer, or you can always just dive right in through RChain Atlassian's instance. And so from there, you can select that we have the RChain public testnet information page, and here we are. You're welcome to take a look at this on your own, but what I really want to focus on is helping to make sure that there's clarity and address any questions related to our plan for rollout. So keep in mind, we are continuing to develop a highly innovative blockchain platform, and that means there's a lot of work continuing to be done on the platform. But we do also recognize there's a need to put out a public testnet, and so that people can engage with it, and so we can learn from that experience as well. So what we are proposing and what our current plan is that the week of March 25th to roll out what we're calling testnet 1. And this would be a public testnet, meaning that you could interact with it, but it would only be run by our chain validators. So these would be validating nodes that are in our cooperative environment and that we as a development team are working to maintain and monitor very closely. But what you can expect as an end user of the public testnet in this phase is the ability as a dApp developer to deploy Rolang, and the ability to transfer rev, test what we call test rev. So again, not the rev token, but the test rev token that operates on the public testnet, and investigate the possibilities of how Alice can pay Bob in that type of scenario. We also recognize, because we are still working towards resolving some known stability issues, that in this version of testnet 1, it is very likely the possibility of two things. One is we know that we're going to have to take down and bring back up nodes as they experience problems. Two, we expect, especially as bug fixes come in, that we are very likely to need to relaunch that network during that phase 1, so that we're prepared to do that. We're going to be monitoring so that we can do that. But that what that might mean to you as an end user is that, for example, you may have a node connected as a read-only node looking at the network, and we would have to, take down that network, take down that blockchain, and start again. That's just a known reality of where we are in the platform, and it's an important part of this testnet 1 phase. We do have a plan in place that as we need to relaunch that network or update that network, we would communicate that through this page as well as through the Discord channel. We very much want to keep you informed. We don't want to interrupt your use of the testnet as much as possible, and yet it's just a reality of developing an innovative platform system that we may need to do that. Continuing forward, as we look ahead at testnets 2, 3, and 4, you can see that there are additional components of that. I think one of the most significant aspects in testnet 2 is the addition of community validators. So if you were part of the RChain community during RCon 3, and we demonstrated a community launch of the RChain platform, that's where we would also invite community validators here again to do the same, and to participate as ongoing validators in the version of testnet 2. What else? And then we would also demonstrate the ability to issue test rev based on rock balances as part of that testnet 2 launch, which is an important part. Again, a priority for releasing Mercury is twofold. One, that we have a community launch of the RChain platform. So that includes community validators and others who are observing that process. And two, the priority of issuing rev based on rock balances held on Ethereum, that is also part of the launch of Mercury. So we want to make sure that during our testnet phase, we are also working towards demonstrating that. And then as we move into testnet 3, demonstrating and using validator rewards, validator slashing, as well as the ability to add new validators. So these would be validators who were not validators at the time of launch, but are joining later. And then we're not quite clear on the exact timing of the launch of testnet 4, but a key part of that would be to demonstrate a full platform software upgrade without forcing a relaunch. I imagine we will do this possibly earlier, but I just want to make sure that we can prove it to ourselves that we can do that as part of our testnet phase. So with that, let me just pause. Are there any questions about this? Or Greg, did you want to add anything else to this?
Sorry, I was on mute. Well, first of all, thank you. It was a very comprehensive introduction to the plan. And I hope that people understand what the, sort of the implications of the things you said. And I do hope that people on this call and in the next few days will dive in and make sure that they've understood what the plan means. I also want to say that concomitant with the rollout of this plan, we will start mentioning the high order bits of the block height, where we will take a snapshot of the current Ethereum blockchain for the rock to rev conversion. So look to this process as beginning that process as well. So they are the point is there to begin to indicate our confidence in the rollout of this process and get people enough time to make sure that they've got their rock into accounts that are not multi-sig, not smart contract, but something that we can copy the balances from or inspect the balances from the blockchain. With that, let me turn it over to community and make sure that people have a chance to ask any further questions.
So releasing the first few bits of the block height puts a hard deadline in some sense on when mainnet will be ready, right? Like if we say the block height starts with 100 and then it gets to the point where block height's up to 101, like we missed it, right? So yep. What's the plan for choosing that number and making sure the network's ready to go by that time?
So the plan is to make sure that we have enough leeway in those high order bits, so we can measure the rate at which the chain is growing, or average rate at which chain is growing, and make sure that we've given ourselves enough runway to address any stability issues or that kind of thing. Of course, we can't be super, we can't know that there isn't a stability issue lurking, but it's at this point we really need to get the ball rolling, and this puts some fire under our feet. Any other questions?
All right, well, thank you. So again, you're welcome to find the RChain, that testnet information page via the wiki. There's also a new channel in Discord called Testnet. You're welcome to engage in conversation there as well. So continuing on, our work in block storage, that work is still very much in progress. We've had to do some work to decouple the block store from the block DAG storage as it was causing failures in our integration tests. The team is working on that, and as well as working to purge things that from Casper and the Casper state that could contribute to out-of-memory errors in Node. And so that work is also very much in progress. In the world of consensus, we re-implemented, we being Kent, re-implemented block merging this week, which was certainly helpful for our node testers, as well as observing finalization in the blockchain. So that is all good news. He did some work to help support the debugging of the block store, and both of those PRs are in review. We are starting to implement some of the decisions made in our validator incentives and Casper document. Largely this week, we saw the removing of joining fees. So if you are a regular RNode community tester and have been participating in bonding, what that means is we no longer have a joining fee when you place your bond. So typically, prior to today, you would bond, and when you saw that your bond was approved, it would be your bond -1, and that -1 indicating the presence of a joining fee, but that will not be a feature in mainnet, so we have taken that out, and we will make sure that our node testers observe that as well next week. We are observing some challenges related to validator bonding in our community tests. We've been observing them for quite some time, and the good news there is when we observe them and do some investigation, there's frequently a bug fix related to that. So we're not seeing the same problem over and over again, which is nice. We're failing forward, and yet we're still failing. So we are doing some work as a team to really dig into this and make sure that we're number one, orchestrating that test correctly. Number two, in a very controlled environment, making sure all the steps are covered and that we can really be more successful with this, and then look forward to taking it back to the community test next week to see if we can reproduce this on a more routine basis. So good news there in terms of investigating that issue. Again, as a feature of this sprint.
Can I ask you a question real quick? At one point, I remembered seeing discussion that there might not be any slashing. Is that still, was that just in passing, or is that a decision, or where are we at on that?
No, there's definitely slashing.
So, there is slashing. Okay, all right, good. Is that in? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So cost accounting is still a priority in this sprint, and you can take a look and take a real deep dive if you'd like to, but just at a high level, the work is going well. We are on track with what we agreed to do. So that's good news. The node team is collaborating with the SRE team to reconcile some disconnects in metrics reporting in the performance test harness. That's a debugging effort. We're also investigating some challenges with peering. This is the ability for your node to connect with peers in a meaningful way when joining a testnet. And what we've observed is that's a little bit that can be tricky, and it can take longer than you would like it to, because with more peers, you get more information faster. And if you struggle to get peers, it is often difficult to get information about the blockchain in a timely way. The team is...
But Kelly, we actually had an update about that this morning. So it looks like there's a combination of fairness issue and not the right amount of concurrency, right? So there's only, if I recall correctly, there's only a single thread serving that queue.
Yep, you beat me to it. We're going to address this by adding more threads and dedicating one specifically towards peering and one more specifically towards consensus in the effort to make sure there's enough time and space to get information through to the node.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah. No worries.
So sorry, I didn't mean to steal the thunder there.
Well, the team's doing all this great work. And moving on, test infrastructure and performance testing. Again, they're working to resolve some discrepancies in metrics reporting. Tomasz is working to do some orchestration. So I talked last week about building out testnet in the RChain's cloud environment. We have secured the resources that we need. Tomasz is working on orchestration, not only to bring up a testnet, but to automate it in such a way that we can do it very quickly and reliably. So that is the work of this week. Next week, starting with next sprint, he will focus more on the implementation of our monitoring solution. Finally, the wallet, also a key priority in this sprint. That work is very much in progress, and so far looks like it is on track. So if you're looking at my screen, you'll see this. There's only really one last thing that is purely to do. Everything else is either done or in progress. The work of developing integration tests is the work of next week. So that our next sprint, which is, the feature is available and complete, and Will Q, who does a lot of bounty work for the dev team, will probably start building out those integration tests. Very grateful for his effort. With that, I will pause. Are there any questions, requests for more information?
I just popped into a chat the link to the latest Casper notes that I had seen that say no slashing. I just wondered, it doesn't have to be now or anything.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's
Yeah.
in our new, shoot, where did it go? Consensus. Here we are. It's right here.
Nice. Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome. Anything else? Cool. Thanks for the time. I'm concerned Greg is talking and no one can hear him.
He's almost there. He's wrapping something up.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, Kelly, that was very inspiring. Thank you.
Glad. You're welcome. I can add some, let me just add a quick detail. Greg was mentioning starting a counter towards the Ethereum block height. This is something that we're very much aware of. And in fact, we have not only a plan, we had not only a plan for it when we were under Pyrofex, but also it's a well-documented plan that includes some scripting for identifying, how to identify that block height and how to project the height at which we would launch mainnet. So a lot of that work is definitely in place. We do need to continue to have the discussion in terms of when to start that counter as it relates to the launch of the mainnet and how to communicate that. We no longer have the web development support that we had in the previous scenario, so we would need to think a little bit about as a dev team about how we're going to communicate that information that was originally intended to be an animated view in a web page, which I don't think we're going to be able to continue to support.
We actually do have some more web dev resources that.
Oh, cool.
Yes. So that came on in the last week or two. So we can they're spread across several different functions, but we can definitely add that to the mix. Any other questions on this?
So how does taking on new web devs and other resources like that sync up with like the financials we've all been waiting for? And I guess the board is probably like doing their best to make decisions about who's worth hiring and who's not in a transparent way.
That's exactly right. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. So, but before we get to financial discussions, I want to stick to the platform, and then we'll move on to financial discussions.
Oh yeah, totally. I was just thinking more about like hiring and.
Yeah, of course.
Because it sounded like your project manager didn't know there were new dev resources, which is a little concerning.
No. It's because it's been a conversation that's been ongoing, right? So it's across a couple of different efforts. So the project manager doesn't need to know what we're doing on our websites, for example. Okay, any other questions about the platform? Going once, going twice. Okay, so with that, what I will do is I will, so Kate and Mark worked diligently, and they're very detail oriented. I can guarantee you that. I have been following all their communication threads to get a draft financial report. We now have that draft financial report. in advance of the compilation that's signed off by Hunt Jackson. So that draft financial report, which is sitting in my inbox, will be released to a members only channel by the end of today. And the high order bit is what I think everyone has been able to sort of suss out, that under the current rate, we run out of operating capital in the mid-May, end of May timeframe, depending on what we do with staffing. So we're doing our best to make sure that we sort of manage things appropriately in terms of making sure if we don't get money in the door, that we wind things down in an orderly fashion. But most importantly, we're putting all our wood behind getting money in the door. And there are several irons in the fire with respect to that. It is not at a juncture where I can talk too much. I can say, for example, that Ravi and I are headed off this afternoon, pretty much on the heels of this call, to meet with a large software company in Redmond. But that's kind of the level at which I can talk about the irons that are in the fire. In terms of the process with respect to discussing the financials, again, the financials will be in a members only channel, and then we will set up a closed door member only session to discuss the financials and our various options in more detail, and sort of beyond this high order bit, on a session much like the one we had, was it last Friday or Friday before last? Last Friday. So it will be a closed door session about the same time to answer questions about the financials and to take input from the community as to how they feel about the best use of the resources. So any questions about that?
So you said those will be out today or by the end of today, so I could probably reasonably interpret that as like midnight Pacific time. There's a video a couple of weeks ago saying they'd be out by the end of the week or the beginning of next week. So is there any further assurance that this isn't just
So I apologize for my for misspeaking the last couple of times. I had misunderstood Kate's communications with Hunt Jackson and had thought that the books were ready, and so this time I actually have the draft report in my inbox. So it's a different story. Before, what I saw was an indication of a handoff, but the handoff actually didn't happen. So that was entirely my fault. And now here I actually have the draft report in my inbox, and so I can control whether or not it gets published to that channel.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Greg. And then the other thing you mentioned was you and Robbie were going to go meet with this company. Robbie's the new Kenny, right?
I wouldn't call him the new Kenny, no.
The new COO, though. Yeah,
exactly. Kenny's inimitable.
Cool. And so then he probably went through the same like vetting and approval process with the board that the web dev you were mentioning did, where everybody sort of vetted him and approved him and gave feedback and everything.
So in general, you don't have a board do that low level web dev kind of stuff. That's not what a board is for.
How about Robbie though? How about Robbie? He seems more important.
Of course, and that's exactly, so Robbie has met with the board twice, and we have a very good relationship developing here. So yes.
Yeah, so the board members are on board with bringing him on and things like that, right?
To a large measure. I mean, I haven't heard from every single board member yet, but sure. There's enough support that it's a done deal.
Okay, awesome. That's cool. Well, I would invite any board members who feel like it to corroborate that. If obviously you can't control what anybody says, but thank you, Greg.
Sure, of course.
Greg, I had a quick question, just kind of hypothetically speaking. This popped into my head this morning was, if perchance the co-op doesn't make it and we end up dissolving the organization, what happens to the immersion license?
The immersion license, well, there are two possibilities. One is if we go forward with the RSong incorporation and RChain assigns the license to RSong, then it could remain a viable option where RSong sort of is the continuation of RChain in some sense, because we have significant interest in RSong. Otherwise, the immersion license reverts back to immersion because there's no legal entity on the other end of that agreement.
Okay. Do we still owe them some money though, don't we? Or has that all been paid off?
We do owe them some money, but it's not due for quite some time.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions from the community?
Speaking of monies due, what is the status of anything with IRS negotiations?
Yeah, so most of that is going to be handled through our new counsel. So I'm speaking with the new counsel on at 12:30 today. So with luck, we have an engagement from new counsel. I'll speak to who those are after we have the engagement letter. But yeah, so that there are two prongs to this. I only became aware this week that the filing for the 501c12 didn't go through. Apparently in January, Hunt Jackson, who was instructed to do that filing, did not do the filing. So I am going to go forward with that filing using a different firm, because once the filing is in, we get to act under the presumptive status of 501c12, which changes our tax profile entirely. So that's why I was, let's say, temperamentally challenged when I discovered that we didn't complete that piece of the puzzle, because it means millions of dollars worth of tax exposure to the co-op. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get that done, and that changes our tax exposure considerably. And then on the heels of that, we will reassess the tax obligation, and then contact the IRS for a payment plan under the presumptive status of 501c12. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Greg, I have a statement of something I want to say, and I don't know if I can make this as clear as I'd like to, but I have, in the process of being around all the stuff having to do with RSong and all the conversations going around it, as well as the conversations around the co-op and all the problems we have and so forth, I've come to the conclusion that the upside of RSong is tremendous. And I think that hasn't been communicated accurately to the community at large, or communicated well enough. And I'm not blaming anyone for that communication. I just don't know how that would be done. But I will say that if we had more of a kind of a war room situation where we were working on these things a little more constantly and straightening out communication, there is a way out of this, and we have attorneys that we can use to figure out how to find the way out of it. And my feeling is the way out of it is RSong. It can definitely be the tail that wags the dog. There's little else in the way of a unique sales proposition until the net gets launched. So that would be one to go with for now. That's just my feeling about it. And I think if people are unhappy about things, it's understandable. But let's get past the unhappiness and find a way out. That's what I'm.
No, yeah, I think you're exactly right, Rudy. And for me, I'm going to put everything, all my wood behind this arrow, bringing funding in the door up until the last possible moment. I have spoken in the last several weeks. I've spoken to so many investors, and to a person, they all say this: we believe in your tech. There's not a single investor who doesn't say to me that they believe in the tech. Every single one of them, when they see what we've got, it's kind of hard to deny the viability of the tech. The real issue is addressing some of the other sort of organizational and partnership challenges that the co-op faces. So that's what we're working to address with a variety of investors. And I mean, I've had some of them, you know, in the last few days say, we really feel the co-op deserves to make it. So that's been reiterated to me through multiple different channels. So I'm going to pursue it with you know, everything I've got to make sure that we make good on the sentiment behind those statements. So I'm very much in agreement with you, and I think it's even more than that. Like the arterial folks sent me a really fantastic letter. They want to include us more and more in their go-to-market strategy. And I can provide some details and color to that probably as early as next week. And that helps also with the marketing of the platform. And that's you know, that's one of the things that you've rightly called out. The PR around us has not been good, and we're going to take the bull by the horns on that. And also we have to recognize honestly that we have some very active detractors who have made it their goal to try to take down the co-op. And so we have to fight that battle on that front as well. But even that kind of thing gives me a lot of hope, because what it means is they can see we've got a real, viable, valuable tech.
Right.
Right. If we were smoking dope, if we were, if we were, out in La La Land, then it wouldn't be worth it to spend time on us.
No, I mean, it's obvious to me that needs to be communicated. That part of this business is pretty solid, and I just think this is like disarming a bomb. There's nothing pretty about that. It's hard to be graceful and lovely when you're disarming a bomb, but once you get the wires figured out and uncrossed and how to go forward, then it can be a different kind of world. And I think we can find that world. That's
I'm with you, Rudy. I'm totally with you. But to that end, I have to say that we've got some very interesting negotiations coming up, like in just a few minutes here, with one of our partners, and so I want to have as much time to prepare for that as possible. And I've got to speak with counsel in just a few minutes, and we also have to get on the road to Redmond shortly after those discussions. So unless there's any other burning questions,
I've got another couple at least.
Okay, go for it.
One is that these financials are in your inbox, right? And they're 38 days overdue. So it would be awesome if you could make them available now instead of in a few hours.
I understand. I'll do the best I can, Joshi. I have a lot of things that are Pri 1, Sev 1. I'll do the best I can.
Those are okay. I hope you do, Greg. I hope that's not just something you say, because it sounds like it's a click away, right? And they're 38 days overdue, and you've been telling us for weeks that they would be right here. And then my second one.
You know what? I agree with you, and I feel just as frustrated as you. What I discovered was that the books were the attempt to balance the books began in December. Now that's not normal business practice. The books should have been balanced on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and a quarterly basis.
Yeah, man. Whoever was in charge of that made a big mistake. We should get the president to answer to that.
So that's why I'm very frustrated about the process. But now that I have gotten to the bottom of what happened, that's not going to happen again.
Mm-hmm. Right? And then my next question was, I see that Kenny had mentioned that Ravi has not yet been appointed or accepted to any position, but he's the one going with you to negotiate business deals about something in Redmond. Should that be someone who's an employee or has signed some kind of like, I'm going to work for the co-op document and not be a double agent or someone who's like sort of, you know, officially in?
I love your concern and your diligence. Let me tell you this.
I don't think you do, but yeah, I look forward to the result.
No, I really do. But I'll tell you this: if I don't have Ravi at my side, there's no way I can pull this off. So it's really that simple. So if you want to cast aspersions on the process, that's fine, and I really appreciate your skepticism. Skepticism is definitely welcome, but I need additional support, and I think you understand that, right? You've been concerned about my ability or the co-op's ability to respond to various obligations to the membership. If I don't have that support, I will get even slower and slower in responding to these kinds of things. So you know, it's really kind of it's up to the co-op, right? If the co-op wants to throw in the towel now,
well, it's not about throwing in the towel.
They can do that. But I need help. None of us
have even really met or heard of, and taking them to negotiate, you know, co-op business deals, and then you come on this debrief once a week and you say, you know, we're working hard behind the scenes where, well, you know, board members are leaving and we're bringing people in that we don't know of. So like, I think that's a pretty well-founded concern, Greg. And I think that
I'm not saying it's
the misdirection just makes light of it.
So Josh, I really appreciate your concerns. I understand where you're coming from. I think Kenny's on the call. What's your feeling about Ravi?
So I've had a chance to speak with Ravi over the last few days. We've had some constructive and great conversations. I think after getting to know him more, I feel fairly confident in his abilities and his experience. But I think absolutely the community needs to have an opportunity to have that same time with him as well. I don't think I'm any more important than anybody else, and everybody should have a chance to make their own opinions about Ravi.
So I wanted to ask a question. I've just heard that he's actually not going to be joining as a COO, as an employee, but as a consultant. And I don't know what his salary is going to be, but I'm just wondering, since we're so close to running out of money, if bringing him on as a quote unquote high paid consultant at this point is the fiscally prudent thing to do.
Okay, well, here's the fiscally prudent thing to do. Bring money in the table. If we penny pinch now, we just should wind things up right now.
That's not what I'm saying, though. That's a mischaracterization of what I said.
Well, what I'm saying is we need someone who is high powered to come in and help. And people who are high powered are going to come with a corresponding price tag, and that's just the way things work.
Couldn't we structure a deal where he's coming in on a commission basis to broker a deal, and if he actually produces and brokers a deal, then happily pay him a broker's fee?
We want someone who's going to step into a COO role, not just make a deal. It's not just about making deals. It's also about day-to-day operations, and that actually requires work. And well, let me just put it this way: would you step in? Would you do the kind of work that Kenny's doing, plus on top of that, accelerating our deal making for no cash? Are you in a position to do that?
So I don't really like these all or nothing kind of options.
But it's really not all or nothing. What it comes down to is we have to move. We have roughly 40 days to turn the situation around. And we can do a lot of deliberation and spend our time going, well, is Ravi the right guy? And he could go and meet with every community member personally, right? But first of all, that's not how the co-op is structured. That's not how the co-op is structured. The co-op is structured in such a way that they elect a board, and the board appoints the executive, and the executive makes these judgment calls. So I appreciate the community's concern, and this is exactly why we brought Ravi into the community call last week, and precisely why we've had other people engage with Ravi. I don't think that Ravi needs to go and be interviewed by the community, because that's not how the co-op is structured.
So this is kind of spinning away, Greg, from what I was asking. So let me try to restate. the COO responsibilities that Kenny was doing, if we don't have a person doing that, do we have a list of what those activities are? And is there anybody who's already on payroll who could take that over to help us not have to hire a COO at this point? So that's one. And then the second is, and this is in all deference to Ravi, but if Ravi is that kind of person who could actually go out and get these deals, then for the immediate future, why don't we put him on a retainer and have him work in that capacity to go out and drive these business deals? And when the deals come in, you know, we pay him a broker's fee, which is another way these deals happen frequently.
I hear you, and I appreciate that structure, and we've been contemplating exactly those kinds of structures. It's a good way of thinking. So the short answer is yes, we have a list. That's exactly what Ravi and Kenny have been talking through the last couple of days. And no, there's no one who can step in and seamlessly integrate that with the deal making. The most important thing is that anyone who's going to be doing deal making has to be facile with all of that information. Otherwise, they can't speak to it confidently. So it really is an integrated role that we need to be filled right away if we're going to make the kind of headway that we're going to make. So, you know, but I'm as the executive going to make a judgment call here, right? If I don't have someone to fulfill that position, I will not be able to successfully navigate all the things that have to be navigated. It's really, really that simple. I've got to be able to simplify the things on my plate in order to get stuff done, right? So people need the financials, and people need to see money coming in the door, and the dev team needs to keep functioning. And in order to do that, I need someone I can count on, you know, 24/7. And Ravi's the kind of guy that I can count on. He's already given me his personal assurance that this is the way he operates. So I'm willing to do what it takes in order to make these last few days, if they are into not our last few days, but our turning point.
I think it's very necessary for someone who goes out and negotiates anything to be facile. That's the right word. And it may not be a word that everyone loves because it sounds kind of like slick and smooth. But guess what? You need that. You have to have that. We don't have that person on staff. Sorry. So the thing that has to happen is that you sometimes have to trust people to do what they say they're going to do. And you sometimes have to deal with people you don't know everything about. And you sometimes have to not get everyone's permission. We're in an emergency situation. We should treat it as that.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
Greg, I don't think you're a clown. I had a really good talk with Ravi about our song stuff, and I just want to wish you both the best of luck today. That's all I wanted to say.
I wanted to make a comment just to acknowledge the diligent work that Nick Main has been doing in the governance committee, and the significance of IOB4, which was instituted in another time of crisis in the fall, which sought to give member voice, instituted in the co-op. And I think that that's a very positive direction. And as someone that's been responsible for large number of employees under crises, I certainly sympathize with your circumstances, Greg. But I'm not hearing you acknowledge some of the work that's being done to really be able to express voice, and you've got an amazing community here that's worthy of respect and trust, and it's a little behind the curve because it takes a while to build and work with trust, but those institutions are being formed. I think they're very constructive because if you don't bring the people along with you, then we see how bitterness and division can really swamp the environment. And there's so much talent and genius in this community. If we can sometimes take a breath recognize, for example, governance committee is coming together. Processes for member voice are there. And I understand you've got a meeting in an hour and you've got a very talented fellow next to you. And I also spoke with Ravi last weekend, and I think he's an amazing addition to the community, and he'll do great work for you and great work for all of us. I agree. I think he's part of the mission critical addition to the moment. However, there are other formations and other things that in the long run and in the process will be efficient. And so having Ravi spend time with the community, having IOB4 go through the board and confirm him in due course, having the governance committee speak to the RSong development and Ravi's development, and having your movement, Greg, and I'm speaking to you directly, but in each breath where you talk about urgency, let's also bring these other forces that are developing and are representative of a maturing community. And because if we get everyone involved in supporting these institutions and being able to express as an intelligent swarm that we have a body of trust here and a community of trust, we will be so much further ahead than even your particular genius can bring us, because we will have the united genius of all of the whole formation. And that's how we get to the promise, the promised land, the promised chain. So I just wanted to speak to that because I didn't hear that. And I know I bugged Nick Main, who's been doing amazing work with the governance committee, and everyone that goes to those meetings. And I encourage everyone to go to those meetings. His audio is off, so he wasn't speaking for himself. So I'm partly hoping to channel his sentiments.
Okay, so first of all, I really appreciate the comments. I appreciate everyone's comments, and I'm sorry if anyone feels that I don't value the differences of opinion or skepticism. I really, really, really value your skepticism. I value your input, and I am open to considering different processes. How long are these processes going to run? I have meetings that were accelerated, meetings with large potential investors that were accelerated from tomorrow to today. I have meetings with council. I have dev calls that begin at 7 a.m. I have investor meetings that begin at 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. How long should this process take, and how much community buy-in while things are being dropped on the floor? Because that's what's going to happen, right? If I don't have someone stepping in, so Kenny leaves tomorrow, right?
Well,
which means that all of the stuff that Kenny does starts to drop on the floor, or I pick it up. Well, and in addition, any sort of additional fundraising or anything like that is now dropped on the floor. All the extra calls that Ravi's been making, for example, talking with the one of the executive vice presidents of Reliant, so people who are in the know might have a sense of what that means for us. Those kinds of things stop happening. So how long should we wait before those can be picked up?
Well, if you're responding to my comments, I'll respond to yours. I reject the binary. I was just simply suggesting that
it's not binary. I'm just asking how long.
You can start immediately acknowledging that the institutions are being formed, and we can figure out what the solution is. Like, you can be working with Ravi. I'm not saying drop everything on the floor. I'm saying let's schedule when Ravi is talking to the community. And it'd be great for you to hear from you as executive that you have respect for the institutions, the IOB4 and the governance committee that were formed at the annual meeting. Because I'm just saying, for the good of the order, if that's in your statement, and acknowledging that Ravi isn't signed, he isn't on board. That's what Kenny just said. I mean, so that's fine. I mean, maybe he will be, and that's great. But we don't. We don't need to be rushing that process. You can still have him as a consultant, a sidekick, whatever you need him for, and we can get the work done. But simply acknowledging these other motions in the community, I think will inure to your benefit and all of our benefit. That's why I make the comment. It's a constructive comment.
Okay, fair enough, and so that makes sense. I think it's actually clarifying, because I do not believe that the scope of IOB4, or we would have to talk very carefully about whether the scope of IOB4 includes the appointment of officers. That is the executive, that is currently the executive privilege. So IOB4 does include things like the incorporation of RSong, and I absolutely agree. But if there's significant sentiment around IOB4 covering the appointment of officers, then it's going to really impact the agility of the co-op. And what it will mean is that the co-op will not, will basically be moving at IBM speed in a startup landscape.
I think it's important to understand that the charter of the governance committee explicitly has no power, and the only mission, so to speak, is to provide means of fostering the community engagement and of getting the sentiment of the community, which I have to applaud Nick also. He's doing an awesome job. And I think that the work certainly is valuable, and it is something that is good, that should get a shout out here. That this is good work, and I think everybody has a positive attitude in the sense that there's nothing revolutionary going on in the committee. It's all 100% supportive of RChain and you. And certainly there are some concerns, but I think that that's they need to be recognized also.
Okay. I've heard everyone, and I will take it. I take all of these comments to heart. Please believe me that I'm not in any way trying to railroad any process or to ignore the wisdom of the community. I understand the sentiments that are being expressed. It's not as if those sentiments haven't been deliberated and thought through. So for sure, each of the things that have been proposed are things that we have very, very much deliberated and thought through, and we we're in agreement that there's a lot of wisdom in the things that are being said. We certainly want to get some buy-in from the community around this. My feeling was, based on last call, that everyone was very supportive of Ravi. That was the general sentiment that I heard, high and low, around the board. Or all throughout the community. And in fact, there was so much support, and Ravi shines out so much that our friends, our detractors, actually called Ravi this morning and said, "You better not do this," which is the first sign that we've made a step in the right direction. So my sense from last week's call was that there was very, very good support. And what I'm hearing is that the community wants to structure the relationship with Ravi in such a way that that would be best for the cooperative. And I think we're all in alignment with that. We want to do that. And then where we might differ is what's the best in terms of the co-op's immediate situation and the priorities on our plate. What is the best way to structure that relationship? And so I think what we've been doing is going back. Bill Swan and Ravi have been going back and forth on a structure to the deal that straddles the kinds of concerns that the community has expressed today, and the kinds of concerns that are the reality on the ground in terms of our situation. So yeah, I don't want to ignore anything that anybody said. So please please understand that I hear you, and also understand that if there's any sort of worry or concern in my voice, it's that if the process of securing this additional support doesn't come to fruition very, very quickly, I will not be able to do what I need to do. And if that's the kind of decision that we want to make, that's okay. I will submit to the will of the community. But it means that we have to take a different route, right? Instead of trying to use the co-op as the vehicle to bring the vision and the technology and all the other things to market through the co-op, it would have to go in a different way. And that's just the reality on the ground. I
think if people brought their concerns to the governance committee and let the voice come back to Greg in a structured, organized manner, I think we'll all be better off. We certainly don't want to second guess everything Greg does, and indeed, the support I've heard for Robbie has been overwhelming. I haven't heard any consent until this call. So I don't think it's an issue in the community. I think we can put that one to bed.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. So with that, I really do have to jump off because I have to be prepared for the next two calls. So if we can leave the room open, but I do have to jump off. Again, please understand you have my heartfelt gratitude for your voicing concerns. I take everything everyone says to heart, and I include it in all the deliberations that I have about the co-op, and certainly in all discussions with the board and the other officers. So I still believe in this project. I still believe that the cooperative governance is the right way to go, and the best solution in terms of bringing this vision to market. And I still believe that we have a chance to make this happen. We're too close now to give up, right? If you look at the testnet plan and you map that out against our financials, you'll see that we are right at the finish line. So it is too close to give up. So with that, I'm going to jump off, and hopefully within even as a part of my call with the council, I'll be able to get the financials into a member channel.
All right. Have a good trip, Greg. Hope you have time to hit that forward button for us.
All right. Cheers. Talk to everyone next week.